his way. Devil is on his way. Devil is on his way, motherfucker. The devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way. Fall to your knees. Devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way. Motherfucker, he's on his...
Mountain Murders is an Appalachian true crime podcast. Listener discretion is advised. The show contains graphic language and depictions of violence. It may not be suitable for all audiences.
We say fuck a lot. Hey guys, welcome back to Mountain Murders.
What's your name?
I'm Dylan.
And I'm with Stupid.
Oh.
Ha ha.
Oh.
Womp womp.
Damn, you waited all evening for that shit.
I want to make you a t-shirt that says Stupid on the back, and then mine's going to say, like, I'm with Stupid, but then you won't know that yours says Stupid on the back.
Oh, you threatened to put a kick me on the back of my shirt.
I want to do that also.
And then little kids run up kicking me. I don't know what's going on.
Will you let me?
And it's like a whole thing for half the day.
Well, see, I have to ask permission now. It's no fun.
So I would reflexively kick the little kids back.
Well, anyway, I'm Heather, I guess.
Yes, and here we are on a beautiful true crime day.
A beautiful true crime day. I'm tired. Can I just say that? I've been working all day like a busy little bee.
Oh my God. You were working with your equipment for the entire day.
My equipment. You
Yeah.
make it sound so like
Sexual.
official or something.
Oh.
Like I have a drill in someone's mouth. Like I'm a dentist or
Damn.
something.
You've accomplished stuff all day.
Okay, anyway, moving along. It's been a great weekend. Absolutely beautiful here in the mountains.
Yes, and we hope everyone else is having a chance to have some pretty weather, get outside.
Summertime.
Oh man,
Love it.
I love it too.
It's my favorite.
You know what? You never notice when it gets windy? You're like, oh, why is it so windy? Because it's like just blowing shit everywhere.
What, then I'm gonna become like an old man? Like, why is it so windy, goddammit?
I'm pretty sure
Like I'm like a crusty old chimney sweep or something.
I'm pretty sure you asked me that very thing the other day. Oh, and remember the other thing that made us old? We were in Trader Joe's.
I don't remember.
I had my shirt on with the Queens of Horror on it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and it was like, okay, so it's like Elvira, Vampira,
Lily Munster.
Lily
Morticia.
Munster. Yeah. And the girl, she was probably mid-20s. She was like, oh, love your shirt. And she was like...
The young woman, Dylan.
The young woman?
Yes.
Okay. You can't say young girl.
Say the young woman.
I guess young girl sounds bad. The young woman was like, oh, yeah, is that Elvira? Do you watch that? What was it? Drag?
She asked if we watched Drag Race.
Yes, the show Drag Race, which we do. And so that's where she knew Elvira from. She'd never seen an Elvira movie. Oh, my God.
And that makes us old?
That makes me feel old. What about you?
Okay. Yeah, maybe.
Because I remember Elvira when I was just a kid.
Yeah, I bet you do. You've told me stories about you remember Elvira.
No, it was one of my first attractions.
Yeah, I remember as a kid, I just wanted to be Elvira.
Yeah.
I wanted her little dog and her hearse.
And I wanted to co-star in a movie with Elvira. Be like her little sidekick.
Yeah, I bet you wanted to.
Who she hugs all the time.
Yeah. We all know what you liked about Elvira.
Oh, yes. It was the sense of humor. I think it's what really sold it for me.
Yeah, that's a very important quality.
Yeah, well, from the goofy to the very sad, I have some... first, before I get into that, let's talk about something happy.
What are we going to talk about?
Let's thank a couple of our new patrons.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, I would like to thank Mindy and Sliptide.
What's up?
Thank you for thank you for your donation there at patreon.com.
Sponsoring the show today.
Yes, and if you want more content, a lot more content, and ad-free experience, and all the other cool stuff that comes with our Patreon, Discord chat, you can find us over where, Heather?
Patreon.com/Mountain Murders Podcast.
Oh, yes, we have any plan to fit any budget.
We do, and if you join the annual membership, you get a discount.
Well, I must say that has been very popular.
Well, you save money.
Yeah.
We all like to save money.
And you lock in Mountain Murders for a long time.
Think about how much you like to save money. You're always turning off lights. You make me live in the dark.
I do that.
Yelling about the thermostat.
Nah, you kids, I'm not made of money.
What are you buying the expensive rich people bread for? You know, Dylanisms.
I must say, we had a tomato sandwich today, and you had high quality tomato, rich people bread.
It was an heirloom tomato.
We had fresh ground Himalayan salt and peppercorn. and the Duke's mayo. And
Gotta have the Dukes.
it might have been the best
Mater sandwich of all time.
Yes. See, we complete each other's sentences.
And sandwiches.
She completed my sandwich. But as in she ate the pieces I didn't eat.
No, that's actually in the movie Frozen. He's like, we complete each other's, and she's like, sandwiches or something. Anyway.
Ah, I see.
Yeah, but
nice. Well, I have something sad to talk about now. In Canada.
Oh, I thought you were going to talk about your penis. And I was like,
no,
we don't need to talk about that.
That's not sad.
He's pretty sad.
That is very happy, actually.
Okay.
A lot of pleasure in the world because of my penis.
I just put a little hat on him and he looks very sad.
You want to take selfies of my penis with various hats on?
Costumes?
Like a bowler?
Like a little puppet show?
Yeah.
Okay, anyway, moving along.
Oh my gosh. So anyway, there's very sad news
You
today.
don't need to share my kink with people.
Very sad news that broke in Canada a few days ago. Mass grave has been found with over 200 children's bodies in it.
Well, how am I supposed to make a joke about that? That's really sad.
Well, this is where the jokes stop.
Okay.
Because this is very sad. And
so tell me more.
So these schools were basically like, it happened here in America as well. They would take indigenous youth and send them forcibly, remove them from their homes, send them to these schools to be assimilated into society, into, in this case, Canadian society. Forcefully. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that's really fucked up. And I think we as a collective, like the entire world, owe indigenous people apologies and probably more.
Yeah, that's
it seems here in North America we've really done some horrific things to indigenous folks.
Yes, it's true, and a lot America that's discussed.
I mean, we're still doing it. Look what happened at Standing Rock a few years ago.
Exactly, private security forces attacked and assaulted citizens
over water,
and it was allowed to happen from the White House.
Yeah, thanks, Obama.
That was one of the times I was very disgusted in my country's actions during that time.
Yeah, I was furious with that.
Yes, Standing Rock was horrible.
Well, Canada's had a lot of problems. I mean, we were talking the other day about the podcast Thunder Bay.
This actually brings to mind exactly Thunder Bay, and nowadays they kind of be like, oh, well, they're just coming and staying with host families so they have the opportunity to go to school, right? But it's really kind of the same thing. You bring them to your largely white schools, and with your culture.
Try to strip them of their cultural identity.
Yes, in these schools back in the day, the children would be beat for speaking in their native tongue or doing anything that was from their culture. Yeah, and thousands of kids attended these schools over the years. And now one of the oldest schools, let's see here, in Kamloops. I don't know if
we were discussing this. So you mentioned Kamloops, and I have an odd connection to Kamloops. So my mother's father, my grandfather, actually never met the guy. He moved to Canada, like way before I was born, like after my grandparents divorced, when my mother was a little girl. So I never actually met him. My mom met him. She has brothers that live in Canada, but he lived very close to Kamloops. And from what I understand, I think he was about 40 miles north of Kamloops, and it's like very rural, rugged area, like out in the middle of nowhere. It's like 400 miles north of Vancouver kind of thing. And Kamloops was one of the nearest towns where they had to go like grocery shop and that kind of thing. So when you said Kamloops, I was like, well, that's where my grandfather lived.
And what's the odds of that?
I know, right?
Yeah, so do you think he moved up there around the time a lot of young men left America around the Vietnam draft?
It was after that.
Okay.
Yeah, he was, I guess, very unhappy with his experience.
With
Vietnam and left.
I think a lot of young men did that, and even if they didn't go at that time, they learned from friends that it's pretty cool up here. There's lots of jobs, all kinds of different opportunities, and I think a lot of people moved to Canada during that time period.
Yeah, afterwards he did move to Canada. He was just very disgusted with living in the United States, having them send him over to watch his friends die. I guess, I don't know. Not to get political, but yeah, so he lived there, and so I thought that was really interesting because it's a town you don't hear a whole lot about. So the fact that this is happening there, just, I don't know, was kind of surprising for me.
Well, and in Kamloops, they're about 160 miles northwest of Vancouver. The institution, the biggest residential school in Canada, operated under the Catholic Church from 1890 to 1969. What do you think about that?
Well, can I piss off some more people and just be like, what the fuck's up with the Catholic Church?
Well, I find it very interesting.
Well, we have rampant pedophilia
That's
within
yes.
the Catholic Church.
Right.
You've got these schools sponsored by the Catholic Church. You have hundreds of children found in a mass grave. There were reports for years that these children went missing from these schools, right? And like they were not reported and it was just sort of swept under the rug. So what the fuck was happening?
Well, that's exactly right. The Catholic Church from 1890 to 1969, so nearly 80 years, they had control of this church, of this school, complete control. Staff often were not held to account for the way they treated the children. Horrible conditions. This sounds a lot like the mental institutions we did a series on. Underfunded, overcrowded, sadistic people working there.
Sounds like a lot of the wayward homes for girls in Ireland that were run by the Catholic Church and some of those like orphanages where there was just like horrific abuse.
It doesn't matter, if you're religious or not. I respect people's right to be religious no matter the religion. But can we just say that the Catholic Church has been around way too long and had way too much power, and that there's elements of the Catholic Church that seem inherently evil?
Well, we're going to get a lot of blowback about being anti-Catholic.
I'm not anti-Catholic. I'm anti-shitty, okay? So, and here's one big golden religious
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really anti-Catholic, but I'm also just like, dude, clean your house, right?
Well, yeah, if you've
got centuries of these fucking problems within your institution. Like, clean your fucking house, bro.
And here's my point with the Catholic Church, and we'll stop talking about the Catholic Church. If you truly wanted to be open and transparent and lay all your stuff that's happened over hundreds of years bare and say, these are things that happened, we want to move forward and make right on all this and acknowledge it. But that's not the way it works with the Vatican, which is a sovereign country of its own.
Right.
Oh, my gosh.
So we have this mass grave. We have all of these poor children, likely victimized. I mean, who knows, right? I mean, are they going to take steps to try to identify these children? I mean, that seems like that'd be really difficult at this point. Unless they were able to access some sort of like ancestry database or something.
Well, I'm sure with all the modern technologies and things we have available, some of them can be identified. Maybe they can start tracking it back to maybe missing person reports made along. But there's also a poor record keeping and all this that hurts that along with all these different schools. But there are calls across the country of Canada to check all schools that were like this one and to check for mass graves. This was actually found with ground penetrating radar. Which is rather interesting. Yeah, they use that oftentimes in searches for geological formations and oil deposits and stuff like that. So, and they were actually going off of rumors of the town around the school as to where to look. And sure enough, they found a mass grave. Jeez. And there was thousands of kids went to these schools. Many of them never returned home for different reasons. Because the whole point was to assimilate you into society, and now you can be a worker for a factory worker, and we send you off somewhere and get you started, and you're a good Canadian citizen.
Yay, worker bee.
We stripped you of all your culture and browbeat you until you act just like us.
Miserable and working a back-breaking job.
Even in modern day, if you want to listen to Thunder Bay, you'll find out a lot about these. There's still a top of these schools were being run. And a lot of these kids were victimized once again.
It's a great podcast, by the way. If you're like, what are they talking about? Thunder Bay, it's a podcast. Highly recommend it. It is very disheartening.
It's very sad, but it's very well done.
Gosh, this whole story just puts a real sour mood in the air, Dylan. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, I think this could actually be a story all by itself.
No, it totally could.
And we may do that in the future. And I just kind of wanted to speak on it because this just broke some days ago. And I think it's a big deal, and I think it's really sad, and my heart goes out to the indigenous nations and families affected by this.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us.
Now,
we are like 15 minutes into the podcast, and we've probably lost people at this point, so...
You think so?
Yeah, new listeners are probably like, fuck these people, I don't care about their opinion. We're probably going to get like a hateful email. But oh well, here we go. I have a very interesting story that I managed to dig up this week. Are you ready, Dylan?
Yes, you discussed this case at length with me, and I must have a trigger warning of sorts. This is about violence and horrible things done to children over and over again in a way. And if that's not your type of thing, if you don't like that, it does bother me a little bit. You'll want to tune out and catch another episode of Mountain Murders.
Well, thank you for that trigger warning, Dylan.
Yes, I'm just full of it today.
You are full of something today. It's
Wow.
Like it's frothing over.
I feel frothy.
I can tell.
I do.
I can probably all that beer you had last night.
A little bit sticky.
Oh, that's too much.
I'm like a 4-year-old toddler right now with a sucker. It's all over me. Gosh.
Ew.
Oh.
Somebody put him in the shower.
I'm going to touch the walls.
Enough. Keep your hands off the equipment. Are you ready to get into the story?
Let's do it.
We've had enough of you for now. On August 21st of 1986, in Bristol, Virginia, a lanky gray-haired man pulled into the East Ridge apartment complex driving a Pontiac Sunbird. He approached his vehicle's trunk, then removed a metal detector. His name was Fred Coffey Jr., a twice-divorced 48-year-old who had only moved to the area a few months earlier. Around 3 p.m. on this day, 8-year-old Travis Shane King was piled up in his family's recliner watching cartoons. Travis lived with his mother, Terry King, and his grandmother, Rosetta Miller, at the East Ridge apartment complex. Shane, as he was known, had been under the weather for the past few days, so his mother, Terry, made him goulash that afternoon and told him that she and Rosetta needed to run an errand. Terry needed a car part, so she and her mother were planning to, run to the auto parts store, and they would return home within 2 hours. Now, you like goulash, right?
Well, people do make it different, but I do like it. I like the idea of goulash.
I feel like you've brought up goulash to me like multiple times, and I've never had it, and you always promise to make it, and then you never have.
Oh,
you never deliver the goulash.
I'm going to make you eat it.
So when I heard that Shane was going to eat goulash, I thought about you, right? So when Terry and her mother left the apartment, they kept the door unlocked. Shane was a good kid. He was responsible, and they didn't really feel uncomfortable like leaving him home alone.
Yeah, and that's nice to have a kid like that, because it is nice sometimes they don't want to go. You're doing stuff that bores them, and you can just leave them at home and know they're safe and sound.
And this was the 80s. We were all left home alone back then.
Well, I didn't have a problem leaving my once they're 12 or so. If they're, you don't leave a kid with 2 or 3 smaller kids to watch.
Well, Shane is 8.
Right.
Which might seem young to some people. But I guess if you do have a kid that's pretty mature, responsible, maybe 8 years old is not such an odd age to leave them home alone for like an hour or so.
Well, like you said, if they act a little bit mature, they're not going to harm themselves or set the house on fire or leave the house, then really what's there to worry about?
Right, and it was the 80s, and our parents were like, here, you're 4, go buy me a pack of cigarettes, so there's that. So 2 hours later, Terry and Rosetta returned to their apartment. Strangely, the door was locked. When they got inside, Shane was nowhere to be found. The pair began a cursory search around the premises, hoping to find Shane outside playing or maybe riding his bike. However, there was no sign of the 8-year-old. Terry King phoned police to report her son missing. Police, along with a dozen other people, immediately began searching the surrounding area of this apartment building.
Now, if I did leave a child or a young adult, teenager, a preteen, whatever, at home by themselves, and by themselves, is that proper English? Then if you came back home and they were gone, now that would be a nightmare scenario.
I'd be freaking out.
I would totally lose it.
Yeah, that would not be cool. Well, a helicopter was dispatched, began circling the area. The search lasted until about 4 a.m. They had detectives, police, neighbors.
So there was an immediate response.
Yeah, they were pretty quick to get out and search for this child. So later, 6 different witnesses would tell police that they had seen Shane with Fred Coffey Jr. around 4:45 p.m. on the day he went missing. The 8-year-old boy followed the man with the metal detector into the woods and was never seen alive again.
That seems like that'd be a pretty big deal if you were the person last seen with a missing child. Don't you think that would be a pretty major deal?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and take a quick break, Dylan, and we'll be right back. And we're back.
Hey.
Did you have a good break?
You know what? I got a lot accomplished.
While the search party used the Eastridge apartment complex as like a base for the search, Fred Coffey Jr. stood in the building's doorway watching the scene unfold that evening.
Ah, yes. Interesting. So the last person seen with the poor lad is also kind of hanging around watching the activities of the search.
Yes.
That's interesting.
Family even noticed Fred Coffey watching.
Oh, so he's really lurking around. I mean, he's just there. He's there probably for hours.
Yeah.
If everybody's noticing him.
Yeah. Shane King was described by those who knew him as a really good kid who was often seen helping his mother and grandmother with the laundry. Like one of the neighbors was like, he was such a sweet little boy, always helped fold the clothes. His mom didn't really have to ask him to do it. He was just super helpful.
Yeah, I would notice that. A little 8-year-old kid who's over there being doing some work. Instead of just running.
You were that kid.
Instead of just running around, causing a scene in like the laundry area of the apartments.
I just bet you were like that little kid.
I've been helpful all my life.
I know.
Can you tell?
Yeah, I can. You're very helpful.
Wow.
A day after Shane went missing on August 22nd, 1986, fishermen in Sullivan County, Tennessee, discovered the 80-pound body of a male child floating under the DeVault Bridge at Boone Lake. Now, the medical examiner would determine that Shane had been killed within hours of his disappearance. The boy died by manner of strangulation. He was fully dressed, and there were no indications of sexual assault. The medical examiner also believed that Shane's body had been stored someplace warm, like a car trunk or a closet, before being dumped in the lake.
Oh, wow.
And I'm not exactly sure, what would indicate that.
I don't know.
Because I am not a medical examiner, but I thought that was a pretty interesting detail.
Well, I've never heard it, said like that, honestly.
Boone Lake is a reservoir in Sullivan and Washington counties in northeastern Tennessee. The dam and the reservoir there is operated by the Tennessee Valley Authority.
A good old TVA.
Right. It's a very popular spot for fishing and other water recreational activities. Very busy area. And it's also about 17 miles from the Eastridge apartments.
Oh, so it's nowhere near the apartments. I mean, 17 miles is a good way, right?
Right. And again, the apartments are in Bristol, Virginia, and his body is found in Tennessee.
So the state line's right there.
Right there, kind of between the two areas. And this is going to end up kind of not creating like chaos, but you're going to have both jurisdictions working together.
Which back then especially would be complicated.
But these guys, they got it together. A local task force was created with 24 detectives and investigators from both Virginia and Tennessee.
So they were
on top of it.
There's no pissing contest. There's no, we're better than you. They put all that attitude aside and instantly.
Well, in some cases we see those conflicts with the different jurisdictions, but not here. These folks were like damned and determined, like, we're going to get to the bottom of this. This child is a poor victim. This family needs answers.
And I think oftentimes a case like that, a young child, kind of, you seldom hear conflicts like who gets credit or anything like that. Everybody just wants to resolve it and find him.
Definitely.
Or find out what happened.
That was the number one goal. So a week after Shane had been found, a neighbor saw the same Pontiac Sunbird again. This time the neighbor jotted down the tag number on this car and turned it over to police. Now, this is the man she'd seen with the boy on the day he had vanished.
So she has no doubt about that.
No. Got the tag number. This is the guy. However, Fred Coffey Jr., a convicted pedophile, would not be charged in Shane King's murder. Fred Coffey Jr. bounced around a lot, and wherever he landed, children turned up dead.
Yeah, this comes up over more than once in this story, and it's really disheartening because it seems like there's a lot of opportunity for the cops to get this guy off the street. And as you hear all the story, you'll be like, they're kind of trying to follow the law, but at the same time, after you'll see. I don't want to ruin it.
Though investigators interviewed Fred Coffey Jr. in Shane's murder case, they had nothing but circumstantial evidence, mostly eyewitness accounts of seeing the man and the boy together.
but not seeing the man harming the child. They're just hanging out. He's got the metal detector. The little boy's probably fascinated by the metal detector, and which that's one of those tools that someone like this use, a puppy, metal detector, help, asking for help from a child. And so they just saw him with him, not in distress.
So during this time, there was another distraction in Shane's case. In August of 1986, Shane's uncles and his aunt were on police's radar. They had been trafficking cocaine in from Florida, transporting it back into Bristol for sale. Shane's aunt Barbara was a known drug mule to police. So instead of focusing their efforts on Coffey, the investigation turned to Shane's own family, believing that drug trafficking could have played a part in the boy's disappearance and murder.
Oh, wow. Like maybe some kind of a revenge or something like that.
Could be. So police began focusing on the family. The task force detectives searched relatives' apartments, cars, asked individuals to take polygraph exams. Of course, this created discord within the family as members were pitted against each other, and some were left wondering who might have known something, and they became suspicious of each other at a time when they should have been united in their grief and united as a family. This is tearing this family apart because they're all devastated over the loss of this little boy. And now police are pointing fingers and they start to question, well, does he know something? Did she do something to this child?
Well, seems really unfortunate. Of course, you shouldn't traffic cocaine, right? That it's a crime and you're harming the community doing that. But this is really unfortunate that this turned out like this because, like you said, they should be banding together in supporting each other. But then you got the cops questioning everyone, telling people what they think might happen.
Well, it was just a big distraction away from this other guy who was last seen with the boy. So it just sort of took the resources and attention away from Coffey, and they're focusing on this family.
I find that amazing because, I get it. They're like, well, maybe. But that's if the case, kind of putters out, you start thinking this kind of far-fetched, right? That maybe it's some kind of retribution or, the drug trafficking is involved in the kid's disappearance and death. Because I would be focusing on the guy last seen with the little boy going off into the fucking woods, people.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's because you're rational?
Yeah, I just don't understand. That's Cop 101.
Right. Well, Shane's mother has refused interviews over the years with media. Her relatives say she was never the same after her only child was murdered. I can't imagine. Poor woman. Well, when a September 1986 Bristol newspaper published a photograph of Coffey naming him a prime suspect in Shane King's disappearance and murder, detectives in Mecklenburg County, North Carolina, took notice. Mecklenburg County, by the way, if you're unfamiliar with North Carolina's geography, is basically like the Charlotte area.
Yeah.
It's in the Piedmont, borders South Carolina.
Yeah, it's about halfway between the Raleigh-Durham area and the mountains.
So Charlotte, the Queen City, very, kind of big city for North Carolina, big banking industry there.
Yeah, and this would be hundreds of miles away from Bristol, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So Fred Coffey Jr. was a name known to Mecklenburg law enforcement. Frederick Howard Coffey Jr. was born March 20th of 1945 in Bristol, Virginia, to parents Fred and Pauline Coffey. The Coffeys were married in 1940, and Fred Sr. served in World War II. Life in the Coffey household was not good. Fred Sr. was a pedophile who sexually abused both his son, Fred Jr., and Fred's sister, Peggy Jean, from the time Fred was 6 years old.
There's just no words to describe my hatred for someone who would do that.
Yeah, no kidding. This the whole story made my stomach
Yes,
turn.
this is very disturbing.
When Pauline finally figured out what was happening to her children, she left. She fled, took the children, she divorced Fred. However, Fred Sr. on more than one occasion kidnapped his own children. He would abduct them, take them to a motel, then abuse them repeatedly, forcing the other to watch.
How traumatic and horrible would that be to know that at any minute he could come back and take you again and do this horrible stuff to you?
Any resistance from Fred Jr. or Peggy Jean resulted in violence and physical abuse from their father. That just sounds like they had a fucking horrific childhood.
Well, it sounds like their father was a monster.
He was a monster and retired from the Army. And I believe lived in Asheville after he retired. So there's that. Now, when Fred Jr. graduated from Virginia High School, he was only 16. He soon enlisted in the U.S. Navy, where he would serve in Connecticut, Georgia, and then later Vietnam. After 3 enlistments, the military denied him a 4th enlistment. Now, by this time, he was living in Virginia Beach with his wife, a woman named Paula, whom he had wed in 1972. It was in 1974 that Fred Coffey Jr. was first arrested on charges of indecent liberties with a minor, as well as indecent exposure with 3 different children.
Yeah, so there's a pattern here. There's a definite problem with Fred Coffey. And so when they denied his 4th enlistment, it's because of these charges.
Yeah, because he had these criminal charges, he was denied his opportunity to re-enlist. So while Fred was dealing with a child molestation accusation, the Navy didn't want to have anything to do with him, and he was rejected from service.
Well, as well he should be. He should be in jail.
Fred Coffey Jr. moved to Maryland in April of 1975, taking a job at Vitro Labs in Aspen Hill, Maryland. He worked as a computer systems employee, and he was living at the Holiday Motel in Gaithersburg, Maryland. So by this time, his wife had left him. He's divorced, living on his own. On July 24th of 1975, 15-year-old Kathy Beatty had been inside most of the day watching television. She had just returned from a vacation with her mother, Pat, and her sister, Teresa. They had gone to Atlantic City.
Ooh. Making that money.
Atlantic City's kind of gross, I have to be honest.
You say that every time we say Atlantic City.
Yeah, it's gross.
This is no offense to anyone who lives in Atlantic City, but I'm sure you know what she's talking about.
No, people who live in Atlantic City would probably be like, it's gross.
It is kind of gross.
It's kind of grody. And a pigeon shit on my head there.
Well,
I'm sorry, it wasn't a pigeon, it was a seagull.
Yeah, I feel like that left a bad impression of Atlantic City for me.
Yeah, it's gross. I got shit on. I don't like it.
Any place that I get shit on, I'm going to label it.
I'm not a fan of getting shat on.
I'm going to label it gross.
So on that day, Pat and a friend were going to drive up to Baltimore to catch the Maryland lottery drawing. She told her daughter she'd be back by 10 p.m. and that Kathy would have to fix herself dinner that night. Kathy asked her mother if she could ride her bike, and Pat was a pretty strict mother, but she agreed that Kathy could ride her bike as long as she would be home before dark. Like, she was pretty strict about anytime her daughters were outside, like, if it starts to get dark, you better get home.
So she's just not going to let them run wild and not know where they're at. She's going to know basically where they are, what they're doing.
Yeah. So when Pat arrived home that evening, there was a terrible thunderstorm. It was pouring rain out, and when she pulled up into the driveway, she noticed there were no lights on inside the house, and she knew almost instantly that something wasn't right. Her daughter, like most teenagers, would have every light in the house on.
Oh my God, every dad in the nation and mom are just like, turn the damn lights off. If your lights are on in a room you're not using, you're out of pocket.
You're like that. You tell me this.
Well,
I feel like we live in the dark. I feel like like a mole living underground because you keep this house so fucking dark. And I'm like half blind and I can't see shit.
So just out of reflex.
And I beg you, can we please turn a light on? And Dylan's all like, ah! He's like Nosferatu, like screaming in the sunlight like he's going to die.
I flip lights off out of reflex, even when you may be using the lights, and I apologize.
Yeah, it's always dark in here. So when Pat goes inside the house, it was obvious that her daughter had not been home. And her daughter had left no note. So Pat decided to drive over to Kathy's friend Sue's house. Sue lived close by, and the pair usually spent time together. However, Pat learned that Kathy hadn't been at Sue's house at all that evening, and they hadn't seen her.
Oh, okay. And now the worry sets in.
It does. So panicked, Patricia felt she needed to call police. Kathy's sister Teresa suggested that Pat check an area called The Hill, which was located by the town's Kmart. It was like behind the Kmart. And it was just kind of this hill area, a little rocky, but it's where all the kids would kind of hang out, like an area known for teenagers. Probably a little drinking, smoking, whatever, hanging out there.
A little kissing.
Now, I have to tell you, the Vitro Labs, where Coffey was employed, was directly across the street from this Kmart.
So he's directly across the street from where the kids are known to hang out.
Yeah.
And everywhere this guy shows up, works, or lives,
Something bad happened.
mysterious things happen to young people around him.
Right. So, like I said, Vitro Labs located right, like, by the Kmart. So, rushing through the rain, Pat drove to The Hill. And that's when she saw a patrol car circling the area. She was able to flag the officer down, and Pat explained that her teenage daughter was missing, but in the rain, she wasn't really able to search the area. So the officer told Pat to go home and wait by the phone. If Kathy didn't show up soon, make a missing persons report, and that he would search the woods for Kathy and get back to her. So he's going to go climb this hill area, look for this girl. When Pat arrives back home, she began calling around, asking various friends, people they knew, has anybody seen Kathy? There was even a boy that Kathy had a crush on, and it sounds like she may have had like a bit of a relationship with him. Like they kind of went together for a while.
Oh, they might have made it to second base.
And then like maybe broke up, but she still kind of had a thing for this guy. So Pat dialed his family's home. I mean, she was desperate to find her daughter. The boy's father said that his son and a friend were camping out in the backyard in a tent. But when he went out to check on them, the boy wasn't there. And told Kathy to call back in the morning and speak with the boy. So she did. At 7 a.m., she called, she spoke with the boy. He would deny seeing Kathy at all, said he hadn't talked to her on the day she went missing, and that missing persons report was made on Kathy Beatty. Now, the following day, after she's been missing, about 18 hours or so, Teresa and her boyfriend went to the area known as the Hill to look around themselves. So while they were walking around, Teresa spotted something lodged near these jagged rocks. It was almost described like a ravine type of thing.
Yeah, it sounds like maybe a really big ditch.
Yeah.
With, rocks lining it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe a ditch is a better way to describe it, but it sounded like sort of these jutting rocks, real rocky area, kind of dropped down. And that's where they found Kathy.
Oh, my God.
So her sister was still breathing, but unconscious. Kathy had been assaulted. This is just a horrific scene. Her head had been busted open with some type of blunt object. So she's bleeding, obvious big wound to her head. She was wearing no pants and no shoes. Kathy would be in a coma for 11 days before passing away from complications due to blood poisoning.
Oh, my God. So that night before, when her mom went out there and flagged a police officer down, he said he would look, go home, sit by the phone. She was there already, likely.
Wow. Kathy had been sexually assaulted, and in the days following, detectives learned that witnesses had seen Kathy walking around about 8:30 p.m. on the evening she had disappeared. She was last seen walking from Parkland Middle School, like in the direction that would have been going like toward her house.
Yeah, maybe heading home.
Right. So no one saw her after that. And the day after Kathy's body was discovered, Fred Coffey Jr. called Vitro Labs to ask for his last paycheck. He explained he had to quit his job due to an emergency. His wife and child had been in a terrible car accident in West Virginia, and he would need his paycheck forwarded. But Fred Coffey wasn't married at that time, and he didn't have any children.
So, and I think that's typical when something like this happens and you take a guy who he all of a sudden takes off. And it sounds like Fred kind of is not tied to one area. He kind of moves around a lot of different jobs.
He does. He's a bit transient.
Yeah, and he's going to get the hell out of there, which is not a good sign.
Well, Kathy's case remains unsolved, but Fred Coffey has been a suspect for over 40 years. But again, they don't really have anything to tie him to this murder other than these strange coincidences.
Well, you know what? There should be a law, and if you keep being brought up in murder investigations and possibly suspected as being the perpetrator over and over again. And I don't care. Well, I mean, it matters, but it's all these circumstantial evidences, but you keep popping up. At some point, when does someone say, hey, we got to find something besides circumstantial evidence on this guy and get this guy?
You'd wonder. I don't know.
Jesus.
It just blows my mind. I feel like there are people in prison serving hard time for like less evidence.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you're talking kid after kid around this guy.
Well, the thing is, circumstantial evidence is still evidence, right?
Well, yeah, I would make you answer for, look, a witness saw you go into the woods with this child, and now he's been found dead. You're the last person seen with him, interacting with him. What the hell?
Yeah, I know. By February of 1978, Fred was remarried to a woman named Edith Dinley. She was from North Carolina near Caldwell County. So the couple ends up settling in Charlotte, North Carolina, where Fred took classes at Central Piedmont Community College. He got a job working as an EMT and a fire department dispatcher. Fred and Edith moved to the Jamestown apartment complex shortly after marrying. So 10-year-old Amanda Ray lived with her mother, Ann Aker, at the Woodbury Hills apartment building, which was located next door to the Jamestown apartments. And I should mention that about Charlotte, if you've never been. It is an area where there are lots and lots and lots and lots of apartment complexes. It seems like everywhere, and they're sort of built like right on top of each other.
Yeah, and I think it's always been that way. There's been, there's starting to be a lot of newer apartments, kind of nicer luxury apartments nearer downtown. But I think they've always had apartment complexes. And
they're like just seemingly built kind of like right on top of each other.
Right.
And I'm always just kind of like, why do you have all these different complexes? Like, why wouldn't it just be one big one?
Oh.
Instead of they always have these fancy names. Like Foxcrest Hills, or you know what I mean?
It's an apartment building.
I know, right?
Calm down.
So we've got Woodbury Hills located right next door to the Jamestown apartments.
See, there you go, Woodbury Hills.
Yeah, I know. I always just get like cracked up at I want to know who names these communities.
Ivy Falls Apartments.
I lived in a Steeplechase apartments.
That's a popular one.
In Maryland. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think there was a steeplechase down there in Chapel Hill and Carborough area where my mom lived.
In San Diego, I lived in a couple different places, but one of the apartment buildings, because I typically don't like to live in like a big apartment complex. Sometimes you have to, but it was called like something like La Casillo or something.
Ooh.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't remember exactly what it was called, but it was no Foxcrotch Hills or whatever.
Foxcrotch Hills.
Yeah.
I want to build an apartment complex and name it that.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to our story. I'm sorry. Amanda's mother worked during the day and often left her daughter in the care of a neighbor, a woman named Shirley Burnett. So during the summer days, Amanda would play with neighborhood kids. There were a lot of kids in this apartment building and a lot of kids like around her age. So she always had someone to play with.
Well, and I think that'd be one of the benefits of living in an apartment like that with kids, because they'd have a bunch of friends.
So they would be swimming at the complex's pool, and sometimes they would go fishing at Briar Creek, which was just behind the building. July 17th of 1979 was another typical sweltering day in Charlotte. Amanda and a little neighborhood friend named Jerry Wayne Martin went fishing at Briar Creek. So while the children were fishing, a man approached them and began chatting. He was tall, thin, he had salt and pepper hair. He talked to the kids for about 15 minutes, and then he walked toward the Jamestown apartments. The following day, which was July 18th, Amanda was at the apartment swimming pool with friends. A neighbor named Tanya Ross saw Amanda talking to an adult man, and Amanda would later say that man's name was Fred. Tanya watched Amanda leave the pool area, and then she returned a bit later. So during this time, Amanda went back to Shirley's apartment, phoned her mother at work to ask if she could go fishing with a nice gray-haired man that she'd met the day before.
And I'm sure her mom responded like most parents would.
And told her daughter, absolutely not. So when Amanda got off the phone, her babysitter Shirley, overhearing the conversation, again reiterated that Amanda did not have permission to go fishing.
So she has this babysitter, but she still kind of runs around playing with her friends, going by the creek, the pool. And it's not like she's sitting in the house with a babysitter, right?
Right. I mean, this is 1979.
Yeah.
So this was a time when, kids had much more freedom. Parents were a lot more lenient. We weren't helicopter parents back in the day. I mean, kids just kind of ran wild and did what they wanted. You came home at dark.
Well, it's true.
Or you ended up on Unsolved Mysteries.
Well, if you made it.
Yeah.
But I'm sadly that, you have these people like Fred taking advantage of this environment where kids are kind of not tied directly to their parents all the time.
And it's just such a damn shame that we live in this world now where we have to feel like we need to constantly supervise our kids. I mean, one, just because it takes away the fun of being a kid and like being able to like run around the neighborhood and be a mile away from home, like in a creek or in the woods or doing whatever on your bike, and you don't have a care in the world, and it was like so much fun.
Well, and
then
even
as a parent, we just have to be so on top of our kids all the time. We don't get a break, and our kids don't get like the freedom and the liberation of like being innocent kids.
Well, it's true. And even like you said, you get a break. The mom and dad get to kind of have a couple hours to themselves. The kid gets to have a couple hours to themselves. And nowadays, I don't think we have to be on top of our kids as much as we are and connected. Because it's like when they go somewhere, they're not even gone because you're texting back and forth the entire time.
Well, I know, but I listen to a lot of true crime, so I'm probably always going to be like right on top of them.
Well, I know what you're saying, but it is really sad.
My son will be 40 and I'll be sliding up in his DMs like, where are you? What are you doing?
Right, but they're not getting that break from each other. And I think it was healthy.
Who are you with?
For kids and parents to have those times.
What time are you getting home? Call me when you get there.
Because, when you're off with your friends, it is like you're free. You get to be yourself. Your parents aren't there to tell you what to do. You do have to make these decisions.
Get that sense of independence, responsibility. I mean, there's just so much that goes along with that. So Amanda doesn't have permission to go swimming, and disappointed, she returned to the swimming pool. Tanya Ross watched Amanda return to the pool for a few minutes. Then she saw the girl collect her belongings and depart with the man named Fred.
So she's not listening. She's going to go fishing like she wants to.
While leaving the pool, Amanda spotted another child in the neighborhood named Pamela Dowd. Amanda invited her friend to go fishing as well, but Pamela saw the man sitting in a white van and declined the offer.
She's like, I'm not getting in a van with a man.
She was just like, I'm not going with this strange man in a van. Nope, no way.
And that's the right call.
So Amanda told her friend, I'll see you later, then hopped into this white van. Raymond Claiborne, along with his brother Floyd and mother Mabel Tanner, were fishing at a wooded lake north of Charlotte between 1 and 2 p.m. And I tried every way in the world to figure out which lake they were at, but every news article, it just described it as a lake in North Charlotte.
Okay.
So I was like, is this Lake Wiley? I mean, there's like a couple. Lake Norman, isn't that one nearby?
Yeah, I think we're going to call it North Lake.
Yeah, I don't know. So, but that really bugged me because, I'm very detail oriented. And I was like, what friggin' lake were they at? But anyway, so they're at this lake, they're fishing. And they notice when this light colored van pulls into the parking area, and they watched as a man and a little girl climbed out. Another woman named Wendy Johnson also saw the man and little girl fishing together. Mabel and Floyd would later say that this little girl mostly sat in a chair fishing while the man stood near her and he wasn't fishing. So they just kind of watched this scene unfold. Sometime between 5 and 6, the Claibornes packed up their belongings and left the lake. It was as they were driving away, they saw the man driving his van at this intersection. And Mabel Tanner would say she got a really good look at his face when this happened. When Amanda couldn't be found on the 18th, her mother phoned police. It was a day later, on July the 19th, that Amanda's body was found in a wooded area by the lake. So shortly after Amanda's body was found at the lake, police officers spoke with the witnesses who had seen her there on July 18th. An artist made a composite drawing of the suspect and the van that the witnesses had seen, just based on their descriptions. Thereafter, this composite drawing was published in several area newspapers.
So this is a similar thing as the 8-year-old boy earlier. And this crime is what?
Well, this is in 1979, and Shane King went missing and was murdered in 1986. So I've skipped around a bit.
Right. So 7 years, here's 2 different instances which I'm sure it'd be hard for you to know, like in the King case, to know about this in Mecklenburg County before they contact and say, hey, we got this case, from 7-8 years ago. And here's this Mr. Coffey, again, being the last person seen with a child that disappears.
Well, having seen the composite drawing in the newspaper, a woman named Janet Ash called the police in July of 1979. So this was like just a couple days after. She tells the police that she believes the man in the drawing was Fred Coffey Jr., a man that Janet Ash knew well. Fred was married to her best friend Edith. Now, at times, Janet had trusted Fred to take her children to the park for fishing or to the swimming pool.
Oh, so she had allowed her children to be in the care of Mr. Coffey.
Right.
Wow.
However, she told police about this disturbing incident that had happened a few months earlier in May of 1979. Angel, her 3-year-old daughter, told her mother that when Fred had been babysitting her, he had masturbated in front of the child. The little girl told her mother, in detail, what he did.
In the words of a 3-year-old.
And the mother was horrified.
Oh, my God.
Fred told her, this is what a man does when he loves a woman. And then he told the little girl, I love you.
Okay. That's disgusting.
Yeah.
And to have your 3-year-old say, hey, Mom, in their little 3-year-old way, without direct words and even knowing what the fuck they're describing. How scary and sad is that? And I don't know what I would do. I think I would want to cause bodily harm to this person.
Well, as you can imagine, Janet was beside herself. She confronted Fred, and he was seemingly ashamed. He told her he'd never done anything like this before, and he was deeply sorry. Janet told him that he needed to seek counseling from their pastor, and Fred agreed that he would see the pastor for help. Janet discussed the issue with the pastor and agreed if Fred would begin counseling with him, she would not turn him into police.
I appreciate her faith in the pastor and the church and all that, but that you should contact the police because this is a very sick thing. This is way beyond. You might be drinking too much, or
well, I think we have more understanding perhaps now about this type of thing. You have to imagine this is the late 70s. This is kind of like before sex offender registries, and I think people just were not as knowledgeable about it. There was more stigma. It was like something you didn't want to talk about. You didn't want to bring attention to your family in this way.
That's true.
She probably didn't want to have to put her child through a re-traumatization of talking to police, and then if there was trial, all of that stuff, right?
Well, maybe she just thinks he's sick in the head.
Right. So maybe she just doesn't understand fully, what Fred Coffey Jr. is capable of.
Well, at least she believed her child and did make an effort to confront him and in her mind possibly resolve it or get him help, quote unquote.
Right, because I would have just shown up at this motherfucker's house with a hatchet and I would have whacked his thingy off and shoved it in his ear or something.
How you tell a 3-year-old you love him like that and do that?
What a fucked up person he is. Well, the medical examiner determined that Amanda had died from asphyxiation. Her right eye was blackened and she had small bruises on the front and sides of her neck. The police discovered 2 blue fibers along with 8 animal hairs on her body. So in the months after Amanda's disappearance and after her body was found, there were several reports of sexual assaults on boys between the ages of 12 and 13 at an area called Valencia Terrace. This was an area, and it seems like it's kind of known for its parks, tennis courts, and bike paths. So it was very popular for young people and kids.
Oh, yeah, it sounds like it.
So it was after becoming a suspect in Amanda Ray's murder that Fred Coffey dyed his gray hair a dark brown.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Once again, up and moving all of a sudden and leaving your job. Now he's changing his fucking appearance. I'm sorry. I shouldn't say so many F-bombs in an episode.
Why?
God, Fred Coffey.
We say fuck a lot.
It's true.
Then on a rainy day, was February 18th of 1981. A 5-year-old girl named Neely Smith was playing outside the Jamestown Apartments in East Charlotte. The little girl knocked on a neighbor's door asking if her daughter could come out and play. The child was soaking wet, wearing no coat, and the mother told her not today, but invited Neely inside instead. But Neely lived in this apartment building. I'm sorry. First, Neely said no thank you and went on her way. She was like, no, I want to play. And this mother's like, you're not wearing a coat. It's raining. Come in. She's like, no, I'm going to go find somebody to play with.
Yeah, that's interesting. So this is in 79 they're collecting fibers and thinking about fiber evidence. In our 3-part series on Atlanta child murders, that was a big part of that case was fibers.
Yeah.
And so you're like, well, maybe this is a new technology or a new system and they're trying to get to know it. What actually fiber, the collection and idea of fibers being important forensically goes back to 1857 in France. Wow.
Thanks for that information.
Isn't that amazing?
Look at the big brain on Dylan.
Well, it's called Google.
Can I have some of your beverage to wash this down?
But no, that's amazing that, a full over 100 years that idea had been around about the importance of fiber.
Yeah, and actually the fibers and the dog hair will come back into play in our story. So Neely lived in this apartment building with her mother, 24-year-old Kimberly Griffin, and her stepfather, Charlie. She also had 2 older stepbrothers who lived in the home. But when Neely didn't come home, her parents searched the apartment building, and there were no signs of the 5-year-old. They called police. It had only been some, maybe 18 months or so, year and a half before, that 10-year-old Amanda Ray had gone missing from the apartment complex next door.
There you go.
Law enforcement organized dozens of searchers. They had volunteers from the Air National Guard as well as civilians organized looking for this child. They brought in bloodhounds. They had a helicopter. Police did door-to-door searches of the area. Over 200 witnesses were interviewed.
Wow, it seems like a full mobilization of local resources.
Countless tips poured in, but there were no arrests in the case. An officer did, in fact, interview a neighbor named Fred Coffey Jr. So during the interview, the officer, his name was Walter Dunn, he saw child pornography in Coffey's bedroom and living room.
Finally, they got him.
He didn't charge Coffey. And later Dunn would say he was unclear on what the laws were regarding child pornography.
Okay, that's possible, because that's something you might not come across every day in 79.
But you're a fucking cop. Shouldn't you know? Shouldn't you know that, regardless, if you don't know the letter of the law, this person should be, at least taken to the station?
Could you look up the law concerning child pornography?
Yeah.
Back at the cop headquarters with the big law books and stuff?
Yeah.
Could you ask your superiors what you should do?
Well, apparently Mr. Dunn just didn't think to do that, Dylan. So soon into 1981, after Neely's disappearance, Fred was divorced from his wife, Edith. Now, apparently, I guess being married to a pedophile was just too much for her. So after being questioned in Neely's disappearance, Fred quickly moved to Lenoir, North Carolina, which is in Caldwell County.
So, boom, there you go again. Close proximity, or either being directly seen with children that go missing and end up dead, and he can't keep a woman because this keeps coming out about him. And, of course, they get out of there.
Yeah, well, his wife's best friend was like, hey, your husband did this crazy shit in front of my 3-year-old.
Yeah, and then he moves again.
So thank goodness at least she was the kind of woman that was, not going to stand by her man.
Well, yeah.
Because it's very disturbing to me in these cases when their partner stays with them.
Yeah, we've even had some cases where they seemed almost like they were enabling them.
Yeah. So 7 weeks after Neely Smith disappeared, her body was found in the Mint Hill area of Charlotte. And by that time, the poor child's body was badly decomposed, so much in fact that medical examiners couldn't exactly determine her cause of death or if she had been sexually assaulted.
I wonder if they still put homicide down on her death certificate.
Yeah, they did label this as a homicide.
Okay.
So while living in Caldwell County, North Carolina, Fred Coffey racked up more charges for molesting 3 different children.
At what point do you stop this man?
However, he skipped town before police could serve the warrants. And that's how he ended up in Bristol, Virginia in January of 1986. He got a job as an exterminator and moved into the apartment building on Raytheon Road near Shane King and his family. So with Coffey named as a prime suspect in the Shane King murder, Mecklenburg detectives began their deep dive into Coffey. He had been a top suspect in the murder of Amanda Ray, and now he had allegedly killed another child. So police knew Coffey had owned a van in 1979, and his former wife, Edith, confirmed he had bought the Dodge van before they had gotten married or around the time they got married, and had often allowed their small dog to ride in the van. Amanda had 8 dog hairs found on her body, so police were able to locate the van through sales records. It still had the original blue carpet inside.
I love it when these cops, so they're redoubling their efforts on essentially a cold case.
Yes.
For Amanda that they have in their jurisdiction, and it sounds like they seem very passionate about it, finding out what happened, and it seems like they took a hard look at Fred Coffey, but just couldn't nail him down.
Well, again, he's the person last seen with this little girl, and she ends up dead.
Right.
And multiple witnesses see them together at this lake, and then she's found there.
And that's a big deal when you have a car that's possible crime scene or been used in a crime. It's a big deal to get your hands on that car and do a forensic breakdown of the vehicle. And I always love when these cops, these gumshoe cops who won't let the bone go, will dig around and find these cars in some interesting ways.
Well, you have to think, I mean, they're digging through all of these sales records and tracking down this vehicle. It was not like today where you have Carfax and you can just easily search like a vehicle.
No, there are a lot of
I mean, this is back when they're like literally like shuffling through paperwork and, physically putting in the legwork to like find these records.
Yeah, calling people, going out interviewing people.
So van still has the original blue carpet inside. Fiber samples were taken from the carpet, as well as they were able to vacuum for evidence. 22 of 66 dog hairs discovered inside the van were consistent with those found on Amanda's body. The 2 blue fiber samples also matched carpet from inside the van.
Yeah, and a lot of times it's not just the color, it's the actual shape of the inside of the fiber and stuff that they can link the fibers together.
The sofa that Fred and Edith had owned at the time of Amanda's disappearance was still in Fred's possession, and he admitted that he had not cleaned the sofa in the 7 years since 1979. So police were able to retrieve dog hairs from the sofa, which also matched those found on Amanda Ray's body.
Wow. Can you believe that?
When police felt they had enough evidence, Coffey was extradited back to North Carolina from Virginia. And during the interrogation, he told the detective, "You can't prove it. You can't prove I'm involved."
So he's not saying I didn't do anything wrong. He's saying prove it.
Yeah, he never denies any of this. He just says, you can't prove it.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to say in his defense, but in his mind, I don't blame him for thinking like that because he's been questioned multiple times, multiple areas about multiple cases. And he's, before they can drop the trap on him or anything, he just moves and gets the hell out of there.
At trial, Fred Coffey's defense did not present any evidence. The jury found Coffey guilty of first-degree murder based on the theory of premeditation and deliberation and the theory of felony murder during a kidnapping. The jury recommended a death sentence. However, his sentence was stayed January 11th of 1988 when he was supposed to die by gas chamber. Then the death sentence was overturned on a technicality in August of 1991. So he was sentenced a third time to a life sentence by a North Carolina jury, and he has been denied parole 15 times.
Wow. That's one person that deserved the gas chamber would have been perfect for this piece of shit.
Agreed. So in the 1990s, the Bristol, Virginia District Attorney issued an arrest warrant, but the Commonwealth Attorney vacated the warrant in the murder of Travis Shane King.
So he wanted to, the district attorney wanted him to answer at trial for the death of Shane King.
Yeah. But then the Commonwealth Attorney vacated the warrant.
don't want to spend the money. They figure he's already in jail for something else. It doesn't matter. They think like that sometimes. And it comes down to cost of the trial and all that. But I honestly think that people should be held accountable. Shane King's family needs that day in court.
I agree. That closure is very important. So King's case remains unsolved, but detectives are sure Fred Coffey Jr. was responsible for the boy's death. They just don't have enough evidence to prove it. He is also the #1 suspect in Neely Smith's murder, which is also an unsolved case. Fred Coffey is now an elderly man rotting away in North Carolina prison. He is a serial pedophile and child murderer, likely responsible for far more crimes than we know about.
Yeah, we talked about this earlier. There is no telling how many children he has harmed and killed over the years. These are just the ones we know about.
Rosetta Miller, Shane's grandmother, told a Bristol newspaper, "I told them the day Shane disappeared that the man with the metal detector done it, and they acted like I was crazy."
She wasn't crazy. She was right.
Yeah, this case was really disturbing, and I'd never heard of this guy, but he's a fucking creep.
He is a monster times 10, and it's just... I know that it was no one's fault in particular, but it's like the system failed over and over, and I don't get it. We've talked about this 20 times. Why harming a child is not taken more seriously? Why the law is not super severe for people who harm children, indecent liberties.
Well, it wasn't
getting your dick out at a park. All this shit is fucking perverted, sick, disgusting things that always lead to murder and molestation.
Well, that's the thing. He had been arrested. He had been charged. He was convicted. If only he had been given more
20 years.
time in prison, like a legit sentence that he deserved, he would have not been out in the community, like, terrorizing these children and murdering them.
How is it
victimizing young people
that molesters who have been found guilty at trial in court only get a couple, 3, 5 years for that shit?
Well, it doesn't seem like he got any time. Like, every time he would just get a slap on the wrist, he would get, like, probation. Hey, don't do that again.
The first time...
Here, be free to go, like, do some other bad shit.
Is a 25 to life sentence, dude. You've already proven you've already harmed one child too many, and we're going to stop you from doing it again. I don't get it. Why we allow the laws in our society to be so lax on people who harm children.
Well, we here in the United States, like, we the people, need to demand better.
We do.
We should be, like, on the phone with our politicians demanding... If we're going to have any kind of criminal justice reform, we need to be demanding higher penalties and more to be done about pedophilia and rapists.
Rape is
sexual predators.
I was going to say that. Rape is definitely in there too. If we as a society can be like, yeah, that person deserved 20, 25 years for some cocaine or some drugs they were doing with other consenting adults, then I think we can put the rapists and molesters away for a long time too.
You would think, right? Like, if we lived in a perfect world, if we had a little genie, we could rub the bottle and be like, hey, dude, make this happen.
Well, step one is
fucked up.
Releasing everyone incarcerated for nonviolent drug offenses. Release them in an orderly fashion over the next 1 to 3 years. It would take some time. And make plenty of room for murderers, rapists, and molesters. Jesus Christ.
Well, at least Fred Coffey is serving a life sentence, and I'm sure, I mean, he's an old man now, and I'm sure his life's probably not that pleasant in the can.
It's still more than he deserved.
It is more than he deserves.
He deserved to die choking.
And justice failed these children at every turn, it seems to me, and we have these unsolved cases, and I just want to know, like, why was there not more done? Like, why were you not searching his vehicle when he was the suspect from the get-go?
If you had, okay.
Why are you waiting 7-8 years? And then, like, oh yeah, now we can search his van. Why were you not crawling up his ass when he was your suspect, when he was the last person seen with these children?
Why didn't you get fiber evidence then from his van he probably had at the time, and the dog's right there?
Why are we not searching this Pontiac Sunbird and looking in the trunk and looking in his apartment's closet to see if we can find any evidence linking him to this little boy's death.
Here's
when you have a medical examiner saying this child has been in the trunk of a car or has been kept in a closet for some hours in a warm space, why were you not searching his shit? So I don't understand.
You question this guy in multiple cases, multiple jurisdictions, and his last person seen with the victim who's found dead and assaulted, his alibi's got to be shit. So you're telling me it's that hard to break down and track down this guy's shitty alibi that doesn't exist because he's the one who was killing the kids? Oh my God. You know, it's easy to sit here and do our armchair investigative stuff, but I mean, this is a blatant case, in my opinion, of the system failing over and over again. And who knows how many victims were harmed and killed because the system failed.
Well, we often see this when we discuss a child murder case where there's a pedophile involved, or there's a serial rapist and serial killer who's like a rapist and murderer. It seems like those sexually based offenses are the ones where the people keep getting like a free pass, and they keep like stacking up charges, keep committing more and more crimes. It keeps escalating until they finally get caught. But at that point, you've got a path of victims. You've got it left in their wake.
It's like my mom says, what these child predators figure out. At first, they molest children, and they leave the victims to tell the tale, and it comes out eventually, and they end up getting a little bit, maybe a year or two in jail. Well, what they learn is, I'm still going to molest kids.
But I have to silence this child.
But now I have to kill this witness.
Yeah.
And that's when they turn into the full-blown predator child murderer.
Yeah.
Oh, fuck.
Well, I just wonder, if, let's say 1975, let's say Fred was responsible for the Kathy Beatty murder. She was a bit older. She was 15. But maybe he was still trying to fill out, the whole murdering his victim type of thing.
Well, it's a crime of opportunity as well. And there she is. He can get a hold of her.
If he is responsible for her murder. But if he's not, then that would make Amanda, the 1979 case, the first.
The first we know about.
But I don't believe that's so.
No, I think
he's done this before.
He had more victims.
And if someone had time to go back and comb through cases like in these areas of Connecticut and Georgia where he was stationed, I believe they would probably be able to tie some other child murders to this guy.
I almost guarantee that you could find, with today's computer technology and stuff, feed all this data in there. And when he was with the Navy and stationed all around the country, and he's moved everywhere he lived, there would be children disappearing around him.
Yeah, I would probably bet money on it. Yeah, absolutely. Well, that has been the story of Fred Coffey Jr. He is probably not known to you. I couldn't find any podcasts or any true crime stories, TV shows, like nothing, books based on Fred. My resources were all like scavenging old newspaper articles.
Yeah, I've never heard his name.
I went back and read newspapers from the 70s all the way up to the 80s. There are a couple more recent newspaper articles that you can find online about him, just being denied parole, that kind of thing. Amanda Ray's family does have like a Facebook page where they keep people like up to date on parole hearings and have people sign petitions and be a voice for Amanda, don't let this creep out of jail, that kind of thing. But yeah, this was a case that I had to do a lot of digging and background and research through many, many old newspapers to get all the details and information.
Well, I think you did a good job.
So he's a little known offender.
These types of stories with these child predators really piss me off, but I know what your feeling about it is. Their story needs to be told. The victim's story needs to be told. And as a society, we can listen to this story, and we can pick apart what's wrong with this story. If more had been done earlier on, definitely kids would have been saved.
Yeah, these poor kids. It just breaks my heart, and I feel so bad for their parents and their loved ones. It's hard to talk about, but these are important cases to discuss as well. And I figured, like I said, our audience has probably never heard of Fred Coffey Jr.
Yes, thank you once again from the Mountain Murders Vault, Heather. And I'm going to end on a little bit of a happier note. If you have questions, comments, please hit us up at mountainmurderspodcast@gmail.com.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
We love, that reminds me, we have one more thing we have to talk about. We love hearing from our listeners about anything. You can tell us we suck and what we can do to be better to not suck, or you can tell us how much you love us.
We love the Kool-Aid Man. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, me and Heather were discussing earlier.
No, we weren't.
Yeah, we were. You're a damn lie.
We never discuss anything.
We were just, so tell them, okay, so I'm going to set the stage.
We have a very silent marriage.
You know what? You've been over-talking me a lot on this tonight. I feel like I've been used a bit.
I'm just interrupting you. I'm shooting you down.
Yeah, do I do that to you?
No, never.
Oh my God, I'd never derail your conversation.
Giving you a bit of the old Dylan back.
So, okay, we got the Kool-Aid Man. Oh, yeah. When we were kids growing up, we'd see the commercial. He would literally bust through the fucking wall.
You know, my first thought every time I would see the Kool-Aid commercial and the kids would be like, yeah, it's Kool-Aid Man. I would be thinking, like, my parents would not be very happy if he busted down our wall.
Because
my mom would be pissed off.
I feel like the Kool-Aid Man doesn't stay around to repair the wall. And as a smaller, younger kid, I too thought that seems to be a lot of structural damage to that wall. And I feel like that's going to be a big deal later.
Yeah, like instead of being excited about it, I knew that would make my parents very unhappy. And I can't remember who it was, but I feel like I have a friend that was like traumatized by the Kool-Aid Man and like thought he was super scary.
I've known
did not like the Kool-Aid Man.
More than one person to say that.
Can I just say I don't like Kool-Aid?
Jesus.
It's so gross.
It's not gross. You take that back.
Oh, it's nasty.
You've just never had the proper Kool-Aid.
I've had your Kool-Aid and it's disgusting. It's so sugary and like syrupy, and then it has that super artificial flavor.
Those dyes.
God.
Those dyes
it
are not.
It just tastes terrible.
They're not. Those Kool-Aid, can we say Kool-Aid colors are not found in nature?
My least favorite flavor of Kool-Aid, not that I like any of it, but the cherry flavor is so gross.
Oh my God.
It would make your mouth all red and shit.
Who did I marry? I want Kool-Aid now.
Well, there's probably some in there. You can go make you some.
All right.
Put a gallon of, a gallon of water and then like 4 pounds of sugar in it.
I think I got to put this girl to bed. This woman.
You got to put me to bed.
Yeah, I got to put this woman to bed. I think she's all tarred from so much work.
You think I'm plumb tuckered out?
Yeah.
Well, it is like 1 a.m. and we're recording. So anyway, we'll wrap this up. I'm going to get it uploaded. Thanks for listening to us ramble. And we will be back on Wednesday with what, Dylan?
With Mountain Murders Offbeat.
That's right. So make sure you download that. Have a great week, y'all.